Hello everybody and welcome back to the Brightworks, where by popular demand we are going to be taking a look at one of the most exciting matches that we played on the last live stream. It was a good live stream. We had quite a lot of fun ones. Tuesdays and Saturdays, 12 to 4 PDT. In case you'd like to join in on the fun, this one had it all. It had some action-paction, it had some back and forth shenanigans, and right here in blue, our commander is going to be showing us one hell of a game. A commander that's well known between the Brightworks members, and if you're new to the Brightworks, they're one of the saltiest sea dogs out on the high seas right now, and they go, of course, by the name of Vanaja. Vanaja, extremely well known for their incredibly powerful naval shenanigans, extremely good at conquering those naval battles and managing to scale ecos on the high seas to eventually escalate into a victory. A very formidable foe, and as you can see, spawning right here in the naval position, indeed, on Hela's Basin. Speaking of Hela's Basin, this is the updated version. I believe this is version, 1.1 right here. So it does have a few interesting little changes. Notably, the metal extractors on this high ground have been removed and swapped for a geothermal, and there's been a little bit of a metal extractor added over here. I believe this has changed as of the latest version. This is a little bit outdated even as of recording this, so definitely check out the map for yourself because it's constantly being improved. One of the things I love about the map makers in this community, they're always working on new maps for us to enjoy. Now, you might have noticed that the red team commander is yours truly, going for some of that Armada aircraft shenanigans. Going to be trying to get some of those aircraft out and about anyways. Always tricky going for Armada aircraft because you don't have those shurikens, which can be so instrumental in the early game to make sure that you have a really solid start. Oh, hold on, I just realized. Sorry, 1 second, technical issues. Let me, there we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, sorry. Double bar Beyond Our Reason background music happening all the same time right there. Anyways, music should be remedied here. Hopefully audio levels are back in balance. Sorry about that. Anywho, a little bit of rover damage over on the other side of the map. That's quite nice. Blitz will be sent on over to clean it up, and will manage to shut down that rover quite nicely. Very good. All said and done for a single wind turbine. Not the end of the world right here for Kill Switch, our maroon commander out on the front lines. You may have already noticed, though, I believe I was talking about my role in this here as a Armada commander going into air. Yeah, you don't have those shuriken, and not having those shuriken can definitely be a problem because obviously they are one of the easiest ways to get an advantage in the early game. Just using a couple of those shuriken to save, for instance, any of these earlier units that otherwise might lose to them. Gunboat headed across the map right now for Vanaja, our blue pirate. There is a dolphin out here to deflect that gunboat, so that's quite nice. It was scouted quite nicely here by the missile trucks from Xenodragon, who's going to be going up against Vanaja quite bravely right here. He missed it with the first one, but I think the second dolphin will move to intercept there, and eventually that gunboat will fall here. Nicely done by Xenodragon, who will, on the back of that, eventually transition into a couple of these LSAW here. So we're going for LSAW and submarines as our composition of choice. It's pretty cheeky because as a Cortex commander, yeah, you really have to focus on those frigates quite heavily. As an Armada commander, you have a little bit more variability. You can go for submarines a little bit easier. They're a little bit cheaper, and they don't have as much health, but that's okay. They're still pretty maneuverable. You can also go into destroyers, of course, just like you normally could. Nice little scout harass on the southern side here as well. Lovely stuff. Out in the middle of the map, it's going to be a good old-fashioned medium tank, vehicle, incisors, blitzes, all that good stuff. It's going to be vehicles versus vehicles, is what I'm trying to say here. Chamad, I believe that's a programming term or a system admin term. Anyways, going to be showing us what they've got going up against ANCAP Catrap here, and likewise Venera going up against Kill Switch. LLT having a fun time blasting away that medium tank. Sure, take what you can get, and if it's free, it's even better. Whittling off 76% of the HP of that, definitely well worth it. Frigate will engage these gunboats right here, and that will be all she wrote right there for those blue gunboats. Hey, you know, that being said, they're doing a decent job of shutting that frigate down. We're split firing right here, which is interesting. I don't think that's a micro thing. I think that's just a weird thing that the LSAW happens to be doing right there. But either way, going to mean, at least for the time being, some of those gunboats get shut down. The pressure is phenomenal, though, yeah, and you can see excellent back and forth right here. Yeah, we have the scoutcraft going around to harass the constructor vehicle over on the southern side, but we also have the gunboats moving up on the northern side, constantly trying to get some value out over here. The destroyer is out and ready to fire away, and it will fire away, that is. Gunboats mostly cleaned up over here by Beast Eater, who it looks like is planning to help out over here. Now, I think this was part of the planning. I can't remember exactly, but I believe during the live stream, part of the plan was to apply 2 versus 1 pressure to Vanaja in the Southern Sea right here. So that's part of the reason why Beast Eater is so keen to jump into the economy right here for the Yellow Commander, try and help pump out some of those boats, as opposed to going for tech of their own, sort of scaling up their own economy. They're more so just worried about making sure that there's constantly enough stuff in the seas right here for the Yellow Commander to maybe take slightly inefficient trades if it means at the end of the day managing to get an advantage over the Blue Commander here. On the middle of the map, right out in the middle, we do have incisors running straight into a pounder. Never a healthy engagement right there. The pounder, one of those very brutal T1 units, one of the units that you really can't afford to be messing around with if at all possible. Very, very easy to lose a whole lot of your pretty key units in your T1 era to a single pounder or two. Submarines out now, firing away here. These are orcas, so they cost quite a lot here. 580 metal per orca is quite expensive. One of them will be found and shot down right there, so that's quite nice, but another one is moving up north and it will find a little metal extractor right here. Pardon me, that is a nice little pick-off right there for the Blue Commander. Obviously trying to apply as much pressure all over the place as possible. Xenodragon happily using up the economy right here of the Pink Commander in order to pump out a whole bunch of those really expensive destroyers. We are going for a big old mixed composition though, so we're not just going solely into destroyers, and I think that's probably a good idea. A couple of frigates mixed in here and a couple of scout planes to give those destroyers a little bit more vision to actually fire away at long range, and I think we're going to be in a really solid spot. And indeed, submarine comes out too, and with the assist of Beast Eater 69 right here, definitely going to be looking pretty good. Commander going to jump in the water to build a torpedo launcher here. Yeah, submarine going to be a nuisance for sure. Luckily here, the destroyers are en masse and eventually will shuttle that down, leaving behind a whole bunch of metal, but at the end of the day, the Yellow Commander is the one who took most of that damage. Now, we do have a little bit of a counterattack here. A couple of frigates trying to move around and get a little bit of work done. Elsaw versus Riptide definitely goes in favor of the Riptide. In fact, for basically every Cortex counterpart to the Armada, it goes in favor of the Cortex. That's balanced against the cost, I suppose, but it does mean that as a Armada commander, unless you have superior numbers, you're not going to take a very efficient fight. Destroyers here trying to clean up whatever of this they can. Having a hard time shooting down that frigate, though. Understandably so. That frigate getting well underfoot between those yellow destroyers and making this very uncomfortable right here for the Yellow Commander. And this is what I'm talking about. This is Vanaja's superpower. Able to dismantle these fleets, take such efficient fights. They get down to the wire, but at the end of the day, managing to reclaim most of the metal and spiral out of control using it. It's a very, very interesting skill. It's a very powerful skill, and it's one of those things that I absolutely admire. Definitely something to learn from there. Destroyers moving forward to encounter the hovercraft here. Hovercraft definitely gonna have a hard time against those destroyers. Hovercraft are essentially twice as expensive, well, not quite twice as expensive, but more expensive than regular vehicles for the benefit of being able to travel over the water. However, you also lose a bunch of HP, right? So they're less resilient than normal vehicles, but also more expensive. Very, very costly investment. Heavy Laser Tower will fend off the most of this. While the Tank Commander goes down, by the way, over here on this side. Wolverine managing to get some value there. Big old engagement of medium tanks over on this side as well. My goodness. Zombine and our Dark Green Commander, Wanira, both contributing a whole bunch of medium tanks up to this front line. Frankly speaking, I'd like to see these handed over to one commander or the other. If either of these commanders relinquished their army to the other one, I think it would mean that we could control this a little bit more efficiently. There's sort of a thin line between where you hand over units and it becomes inconvenient, right, between that and handing over units where it becomes useful. But certainly when it comes down to medium tanks, having more of them is almost never an issue. Virtually always a boon. Goons trying desperately to jump on top of these destroyers and succeeding. However, not to very much effect. Yeah, destroyer's quite beefy. Quite beefy indeed. So this is a very difficult one to hold here for the blue player. Augustus Caesar going to be trying to hold all this. Building those metal extractors up there definitely helps, but holding this line is going to be really, really expensive. Destroyers firing away at each other. These frigates are really what you want fighting the destroyers. You can kind of think of it like rock, paper, scissors. Imbalanced rock, paper, scissors. But the frigates, roughly speaking, counter the destroyers. The destroyers, roughly speaking, counter any scouts or any long-range stuff. And then the, obviously, submarines and whatnot would counter the frigates. It's a bit of a tricky one, bit of a weird engagement, but it does work out in the end. Now, because of course we only have, or rather we have a total of 2 players playing in the ocean map, right, or the ocean scene right here, it does mean that we're going to have a weaker front line, and indeed we can see that right here. Medium tanks trying their very best right now for our Tan Commander and Cap Catrep. Similarly for our Maroon Hero, trying desperately to hold this line, but there's so much force being applied through the middle of the map. You can see these numbers have just spiraled way out of control, and now it's time for the major run by right here. Big medium tank ball pushing forward on the middle of the map. You can see all that green jumping on top of all the tan, trying to shut it all down. Metal Extractor stays alive, and that is definitely critical right here. That's a 4.5. No, sorry. Oh, right. This is a Brightworks lobby. We have 1.5 Metal Extractors, so it would normally be a 4.3, but in this it actually does 6.5, which means you can really pump out those units quite tremendously. Now, I've got to say, the air wall is quite slacking here. The player in charge of keeping an air wall up and running right now is definitely falling behind as far as the eco goes. T2 Constructor has been handed over, and you can see I'm going for those T2 mexes as well as the fusion reactor here to really start jumping into a pop-in air wall. Most of the focus has been on supporting this side as much as possible, making sure there's fighters. There we go. You can see fighters moving over in this direction, trying to make sure that absolutely under no circumstances do Shuriken pop up and shut down this Navy right here for the Yellow Commander. One bad fight and this entire thing goes away. Despite 2 commanders pouring their economies and their hearts into keeping this Navy alive, if this fight goes poorly, it ends up ruining our chances at sea. Now, luckily, there's plenty of res subs here to eat up a lot of this wreckage. Boats are starting to clump up as well. Scouts contributing that flanking bonus right here will mean that a lot of these frigates and a lot of these destroyers will eventually go down. It's just a race to see who can collect all that metal first and put it to really, really good use. Now, when you have a bunch of metal lying on the floor like this, you have a couple of options, one of which is obviously to go for T2. You can use that metal to tech up, but it leaves you a little bit exposed because obviously if your enemy uses some of that metal to go for instance, units of their own, it can definitely leave you in a weird position where you have no units out on the field, but you have this huge tech advantage, especially in the seas, but even off of them, that's a reality. How do you counter that? Oh, this Tsar in the front line is looking tremendous, by the way. Beautiful connections right there. How do you counteract that? Best bet would probably be to try and just make sure that when you tech up, you have enough of an army on the front to hold the line, or retreat with the line. Probably would be the best way to deal with that. That Tsar on the front has done some serious damage. 30 kills on the Tsar, apparently. Yeah, 31 now. And I'm certain it'll be more and more here. So much damage from every high impulse shell that fires away. Extremely, extremely dangerous. Extremely difficult to beat. We do have a halberd that's been produced here. 640 metal for that tank. Probably one of the few tanks that can actually go toe-to-toe with any sort of boat here. That is until the boats start kiting and then the match falls off completely. But you can see a beautiful win over here for the Orange Commander. Pushing back the purple, or the Lavender Commander right here. Pushing the Powder Blue Commander out of the seas. Augustus Caesar is going to be forced to take refuge up on the hills right here. Bombers coming in though. Sorry, not bombers. Gunships. Seaplane gunships coming in. T1 fighters not going to do too well against them. Air player, where are you? Air player sleeping on the job. AKA yours truly. Man, T1 fighters do not perform phenomenally against these, though. Luckily, the gunships mis-targeted right there and didn't take down the geothermal right here, which would have definitely been a prime target. Oh, they're thinking about it now. Oh, are they gonna get it? Oh, no. Oh, just barely with the very last shot, those will manage to take down the geothermal right there. That definitely hurts. That cuts 300 energy right from the production base right here for the Hot Pink Commander. Not the end of the world because we already used that geothermal to pump up a whole bunch of those advanced solar panels, but it definitely cuts back a lot of the power that was available right there for pumping out units. Speaking of units, you can see they've marched across the map. Destroyers right in the main base right here of Vanaja. The build power is starting to crumble as those fire away at the auto builders here, the naval construction turrets. A little bit of a messy engagement over here as these destroyers try desperately to get engaged in the fight right now. Torpedo bombers trying also to help out right here. But Vanaja has lost it all. The laboratory falls. The commander starts taking fire. The last destroyer goes down, and that is a commander on the run. About 6% damage or so for each one of those, every one of those depth charges that gets launched. As you can see, those torpedo bombers being quite a nuisance here. Fighters moving in right now to try and clean a lot of this up. But it is difficult to say how effective they can be, especially against that T1. Or sorry, the T1 versus the T2, yeah. What is that, about 7% damage per AA shot? Ugh, not good whatsoever. Definitely an indicator that it's time for T2, and indeed, you can see in the backline here, going for plenty of T2 to try and make sure that we have a quality fighter wall up and running right now. That was Vanaja's commander going down right there in the high seas. Anti-air boats right here trying to shoot down as many of these torpedo launchers as possible. Those are the seaplane torpedo spitters. Quite a nuisance to deal with, certainly. Res subs here, feeding back tons and tons of metal right now. I'd love to see a storage or a T2 or something. Xenodragon just handing all that metal back to the team. Not the end of the world, because the middle lane is absolutely crumbling right now. We need something to fix this issue, and it certainly could be a T2 transition. We have the T2 lab up and running for Stannis. We'd love to see the T2 mexes. For whatever reason, we haven't upgraded to T2 mexes here, despite having the T2 lab. Maybe just worried more so about handling the battle out here on the high seas. Yeah, a little bit of a complicated divergence of pathways here, but certainly wouldn't mind seeing T2s handed out to upgrade all this frontline metal extractors that have been left at T1 for way too long. You can see the blue team doing a little bit of a better job, actually a remarkably better job of upgrading those T2 mexes, especially these ones right here, which provide, my goodness, 26 metal per extractor when they're upgraded to their T2 variant. Extremely valuable. Swarmers colliding with T2, and finally the matchup swings in the favor of the red here in the air battle at the very least. The T2 fighter is quite capable against the seaplanes. The T1, much less so. Eventually, the majority of this being cleaned up, but not without significant cost. And just like that, the sea has been won. Despite a hard-fought battle from two different commanders, eventually the sea is won by Xenodragon, who will eventually clean up most of this here. Looks like destroyers are going to be hard at work trying to blast apart this laboratory that the last constructor of the Blue Menace ever built. And we do have these torpedo launchers slowly but surely falling as well. There's a couple of skaters actually moving across. The scout hovercraft are just being spammed outwards from the backline right now. You can see them moving up north as well. Would love to see maybe a couple of Buccaneers would probably be the right caliber of unit to deal with that. Destroyer up here, the battleship, pardon me, having a rough time. Wow. Will the halberds get the kill? Nobody has power right now. Neither player with enough energy to fire all these weapons right now, but the Despot is definitely outmaneuvering those poor, unfortunate hovercraft souls. There we go. Once those Gauss cannons start firing, the Despot will have an advantage, and eventually it will just barely survive. Emphasis, huge emphasis on just barely. Whole bunch of hovercraft have been handed over here to Vanaja, interestingly enough. Deciding to go for the hovercraft is an interesting move. Probably handed over from the hovercraft labs in the back right here, if I had to guess. Definitely a blunder not to take out this economy right here, and I think we all know where this is going. Vanaja not one to quit out of a game before it is absolutely far too late. And indeed, staying in this one to the very last. These hovercraft being spammed out are being wasted, but also they're slowly but surely tearing apart this blockade that we've set up right here. Wouldn't mind seeing a T2 transition. There we go. We do have that T2 transition coming up right now. A couple of units sneaking through on the left-hand side. You can see I reach for my trusty abductors. With the EMP rework, they fire a constant beam. Makes them quite a menace to deal with. LRPC set up on the front lines. Very aggressively positioned LRPC, but I guess it works. Certainly capable of firing well into the backline, doing a huge amount of damage. Salamanders parked a little too close to shoreline will be barraged right here by the medium tanks and the hover tanks, pardon me, the halberds, all firing away. I guess they can see the tank, but they just can't quite hit it. Sorry, that got quite loud right there all of a sudden. The boats having a hard time moving forward. Yeah, I think Buccaneers are probably the right answer here. Their laser is heavy enough to deal some serious damage, but also short enough and sweet enough that I think it probably wouldn't ruin everything. Friendly firing and all that sort of stuff. Here go the abductors. Dun 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 dun. Now I've picked up units with these, so absolutely nobody should be surprised. If we switch to the blue team, you can see they have perfect vision of what's going on over here because I have all the units picked up with these. But regardless, They jump on top of everything over here, paralyzing it all extremely quickly, and just like that, this entire front line is completely shut down. Tan player got the memo. The Maroon commander slacking on the job right now. Abductors completely paralyzing the entire front. There we go. Medium tanks getting into gear, and everything will manage to be paralyzed. Do we have a fighter pull? Eventually, fighters should be heading on over in that direction. The green commander completely paralyzed. I thought for some reason that when you paralyze the commander, it caused them to explode, but I guess that's not the case. Either way right here, definitely going to be slowed down for a good long while. Allowing these medium tanks to jump on top of all this. Most importantly, that LRPC goes down right here, but also going to be able to target down the commander. Ooh, target down the commander. Oh, there he goes. Commander does explode just barely before those medium tanks arrive. And all of it is for naught, as now the front line has been reduced to atoms and the spam of hovercraft launches forwards here. At the end of the day, more stuff beats less stuff, and certainly this is quite a bit more stuff. Abductors trying desperately to keep all this alive and running, but those anti-air trucks in the back contributing quite a lot of anti-air firepower, shutting down a whole lot of the abductors, making this front line extremely difficult to hold. Sheldon Ball trying its very best. Now, one trick you can do with the abductors is to paralyze things and then tell them to pick them all up. And then when they get shot down, obviously those units die in the abductors' claws. And yeah, what that ends up meaning is that you end up with this weird situation where you can actually pick up tons and tons of metal worth of enemy units and end up, yeah, getting them removed immediately. Considerably similar to the D-gun in the way that it simply removes it from the game. A little bit of friendly fire right there actually shoots down the AA truck. Unfortunate, but that's what the Tsar does. That's the Tsar's bread and butter. This push has crumbled our front line. So this is the investment we chose to make, right? We invested very, very heavily on all of the naval fields right here. You can see we've won this field on the southern side, although not entirely here. This is definitely not a complete win. Bellum Deuce has managed to keep their hovercraft factory up and running over here. I'd love to have seen this destroyed quite a long time ago. But winning the southern side was extremely costly as well, because we had to put so many forces into keeping this well maintained. And then suddenly, it means that our middle of our map is completely left without units. Now, there are some carry tanks coming out of the back line right here. That's one of the Legion T3 units. You can see carries 2,900 metal for each one of those, but not particularly fast, so you do have to be careful with those. The AA is thick, though. The amount of AA trucks definitely indicative of the fact that we've had an extreme amount of abductors paralyzing things on the front line. You can get the sense that the blue team is unwilling to be EMP'd anymore. Dam Buster manages to connect with a whole bunch of its bombs. Nuki B coming in here as well. Manages to drop its payload on the E-converters. Doesn't target the advanced geo though, which is a surprising change. Would have probably prioritized the advanced geo there, but at the end of the day, it's going to mean the BC, at the very least, has a whole bunch of energy under their belt. Wouldn't mind seeing that swapped out for a Cerberus cannon at some point. But now the time has come. A sudden change of investment right here. As you can see, the the blue commander has decided to invest heavily in the duck, waddling its way underfoot here to try and take out some of the economy right here. Nuclear bomber connects as well. Manages to drop one bomb before being shot out of the sky by the AA cannons, the very light AA cannons on the back of those skaters. I think I called these skaters earlier. Those are seekers. Seekers and skaters, very similar, not the same thing though. Now the solution, as far as I can piece it together here for ducks, is just to build a couple of torpedo launchers. You just build enough advanced torpedo launchers, and eventually it's going to mean the ducks, lose out in the end. Right now, though, these ducks are having a feast. Yeah, no torpedo or no depth dweller clearing here right now. So these ducks are having a feast. Yeah, absolutely enjoying their stay right underneath all of these units with absolutely no way to kill them. Paladins are the solution here. Paladins, or of course you can go for Barracuda, the submarine. Barracuda obviously quite powerful, but very investment heavy. Not that the Paladins aren't, but certainly you have to make your decision, and the Paladins are much more adept at being utilized in other ways. They can fight other units, I mean by that. The ducks continue waddling around, though. And these ducks going undressed is a problem. Unaddressed, pardon me. Yeah, definitely an issue. Not having a great solution to those ducks is going to end up being the bane of the yellow player's existence here. Maybe assuming that the destroyers are enough, but realistically they just aren't. Oh, and we're losing so much to these ducks underwater. Every time they spit a torpedo, it does so much damage to these units. There we go. Finally, we're going to move them away here after taking a good look at how serious the threat is. We do have an advanced torpedo launcher over here. You need the sonar stations with them as well. Otherwise, those sonar stations, or without those sonar stations, pardon me, yeah, it's unfortunately a very, very unhappy time. Nice pork over here. We do have quite a few pop-up turrets to keep the seas and the land clean. Nuclear missile coming across the map. Boom goes the nuke. Collides with a whole bunch of the T1 in the backline here. We have a bunch of T2 constructors, but all said and done though, mostly the T3 carries managed to eat up that nuke, swallow it whole, and spit it out and ask for more. The ducks slowly but surely dismantling the economies over here. Oh no. You can feel the yellow player losing their grip on this over here as suddenly more and more units are waddling their way under the seas and getting slightly more value every single time, but inching their way closer and closer here. We have quite a spam, by the way. We have, looks like bed bugs coming out. Yeah, the bed bugs being produced in large number. Questionable at best. Usually the bed bugs, or the tumbleweeds, the Armada variant of the bed bug, quite good at dealing with basically any sort of Navy composition. Another nuke connects, by the way, over here on the right-hand side, taking out a huge portion of the orange base. Tons of fighters moving over in this direction as well. Indicating to me, at the very least, that there's some nuclear bombers headed in that direction. There we go. Bomber gets shot down. That's really the only important part. I love the carries tank. What a beautiful, beautiful unit. Pulsar pretty good too, though. Their twin rotary Gatling cannon, pretty epic. But that main gun that fires a big impulse round, pretty awesome as well. Nuclear bombers trying to shoot as many of them down as possible. And doing a decent job at it. Although every nuke B that goes down to a couple of T2 fighters definitely hurts. The carry's probably the perfect choice of unit for breaking this front line with how mixed the composition is as far as T1, T2, and T3 goes. I don't think there's any T3 yet for the blue team, but it should be marching out here any second. I think the carries was an excellent choice. Gives you just enough damage to take down any of those T2 units, those heavier T2 units. Plenty of AoE impulse to deal with any of the T1 as well. You can see that's the impulse on the main gun, that big wide circle right there. Tremendous. And a wash of bullets. Yeah, sending units flying with their cannons. Absolutely beautiful. So in spite of any T2 torpedo spitting, we have instead opted for Marauder, which is a good idea. The Marauder definitely could get quite a lot of value out here. However, it doesn't solve the issue of the tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of ducks headed across the map already. The ducks finding immense value here. Not only as shooting all this down has yielded, well, tremendous efficiency just as far as metal per metal goes, but also the fact that they just scouted those Marauder coming across the seas. Yeah, you can see immediately torpedo bombers are deployed, trying to figure out where the Marauder are. They know that as soon as those Marauder hit the front lines, it's going to be necessary that we see some sort of response. Mass Tsar tank here, okay. Sure. That's the Cortex bread and butter. Those Tsars desperately looking for a way to find some value. They do manage to shoot down the carries tanks. And I think that's exactly where you're hoping to trade them out at. Nicely done from the Sheldon Ball. As long as the Sheldon Ball keeps kiting, I think they can outmaneuver these Tsar here. Oh, but every shot that connects, it's gonna be big. The AoE impulse on those Tsar is tremendous. Even a couple of them gonna be more than enough to shoot down, yeah, any amount of those poor, unfortunate Sheldon. Torpedo bombers managing to take down a couple of the Marauders, but many of them will make landfall here. Question is, how much value can we get? We have abductors up in the skies right now. Tons and tons of fighters. Fighter production definitely slacking right here in the backline. I would blame that Brightworks guy. He seems to be not so on top of it with the air production this game. There are the Marauders in the background. Oh, just barely don't manage to kill that energy converter. And the Marauders themselves eventually lose all their steam. Just like that. Yeah, the abductor shutting them down completely. Eventually, it looks like we will actually kill the energy converters. But is it enough damage to justify that T3 transition? I don't think so. Yeah, back into a T2 lab we go. You can see eating up that T3 gantry in favor of building the T2 naval lab. I think that's probably a good idea. We desperately need something to kill these ducks under the water, though. Mass duck spam has never looked more viable. Destroyer's not really going to cut it against these T2 subaquatic bots. We have a big old duck swell moving over in this direction as well. Always cool to see. Anti-nukes firing up into the air and colliding midair with those big nuclear ICBMs. Still a big Sheldon ball in the middle of the map, but it is significantly diminished. I have a feeling, probably in large part thanks to the rapid onset fire from the many Zars we have shooting away now. My goodness, Chimad 777 has absolutely got a favorite unit, and it's the king of all tanks, the Zar, coming out in mass fab right now from the T2 lab. And you know what? I think I like it quite a lot. But when you have the metal to dump, and you definitely do in a match like this where the metal has been turned up, where all of the economies are amped up to 11, I think this is absolutely the right idea. Go for those really expensive ones, the ones that normally you wouldn't even bother making because they're too inefficient, too metal dense. I think this is exactly the right composition to go for here. Composition, quote unquotes, big air quotes on that. The nuclear bombers coming in essentially uncontested. They'll connect with the huge clump of build power right there. T2 anti-air, much more imposing than the T1. Still not anything to really write home about. Second nuclear bomber will be shot down, so that's quite nice. Luckily, some T2 anti-air boats were pumped out in time right there, but the amount of ducks is overwhelming. At this point, Vanaja using the hovercraft constructors here to actually reclaim land in the sea. And just by building T2, good old T2 ducks, managing to trade out more efficiently than even T2 Navy units right now, making the Paladin look like a joke. Luckily, some of those torpedo launchers here to defend, but yeah, the Paladin not able to do anything against these ducks. Hilarious. Hilariously inefficient unit. Its one job is to kill things that waddle along under the seafloor, and it's not able to do that even the slightest. Mass duck fabrication. You can see even ecoing on the back of it here. We've got the fledgling economy starting up right here, as well as the T2 naval lab. Vanaja clawing and prying open the door, desperately pulling apart the hinges and the seams to try and get back into the Navy, and eventually going to be able to get another lab down. The ducks fight move is so lame, lol, cries out the spectator. And I suppose I have to agree. Not achieving all too much over here. Hopefully the cataphracts can get a little more value out. Certainly would be nice to see. I don't believe for this particular match we had a cataphract mod enabled that allowed them to fire their turbo laser variant. I believe they were just default cataphracts. I suppose we'll see here in just a second. Yeah, there they go. Firing their pathetic single laser beam. Not good whatsoever. So many ducks waddling their way across, my goodness. The amount of ducks is absolutely unheard of. Not the proper way to scale an economy, as you might see over on this side. Definitely should be spending a whole lot more of this metal. As if to provide retribution, Shiva is now waddling their way up the shoreline right here. Their heavy projectile is going to bounce right off those shields, as well as the rockets if there's energy. We had the experimental shields deflect everything turned on here, so these are actually going to be very difficult to break through. However, they are not infinite. The friendly fire is atrocious, though. Shooting themselves in the feet. blasting away at their camaraderies. Eventually making it through the shields right here, but at tremendous self-sacrificial cost. Luckily, it means the capital ship can shell away over here, so that's always nice. The Black Hydra firing away its quad cannons. Nuclear bombers to shut down the ducks over here as the cataphracts continue moving forward. Absolutely no anti-air in this composition. Big old nuke is fired across the map too. Nuke headed directly towards the backline economy. There we go. A whole bunch of tidal generators go up. Probably well enough worth it. Torpedo bombers actually having a rough time with the ducks here. Trying to shut as many of these down as possible, but really not doing tremendously. The duck's such a tanky unit, yeah. For 330 metal, you definitely get a beast under the water. Relative to anything else, anyways. Eventually, the ducks are well cleaned up right here. But to put it politely, quack, am I right? Those ducks are looking fabulous. Fighter pull over here is quite nice. As long as the anti-air boats keep those torpedo bombers protected, it should be all right. Definitely a tricky situation, though. The disjoint of paladins to anti-airs, whoops, is not looking fabulous. I just bumped the microphone. Hopefully that didn't sound too terrible. Carries tanks going up against the Tsars. An efficient fight for the Carries tank, certainly. With it being about double the price of the Tsar. You know what? Is it an efficient fight? I guess anything's an inefficient fight if you have 3 times as many tanks. The Tsar is just sending chills down the spines right here of everybody. So stunned that we don't have reclaim coming out here. We do have res bots, but they're just not reclaiming anything. They're resurrecting everything instead. I don't hate it, but when you're in a position where you need to rebuild your economy, certainly going for the reclaim makes a lot of sense. Complicated battle. Complicated sea battle. This has achieved very, very little over on the right-hand side. Can't help but wonder, maybe spamming these units across the map has not been the most efficient use of resources. At the very least, a fabulous economy coming up right here, and the catapults headed out to the middle could certainly prove extremely useful. Now the ticks are coming out, though. The ticks, very annoying to deal with. Obviously one of those things that is easy to counter, but not instantaneous. You need to have a Juno missile, and you need to have more than one. You need to have really closer to 3 or 4. The behemoth sent over in this direction. My goodness. Taking the coastal defense seriously here. Gonna send the behemoth on over. Nothing further being achieved over on the right-hand side. Catapults trying their very best to fire away, but this is why the catapults are so dangerous. When they lock onto a fast-moving unit, they tend to overcorrect, and you end up in a weird situation where suddenly you have a, unfortunately, you have a crazy amount of friendly fire. Here we go. Let's see. Firing away at anything and everything within range of the enemy unit. And unfortunately, a large portion of that happens to be friendly. The spam over here has to end. One way or another, the spam has to end. The spam definitely hurting the economies right here. Not sending these forward to reclaim definitely hurts as well, though. We're trying to resurrect the tanks, which I don't think is a terrible idea, but going for more and more economy probably would be the better one. Let's see. Mass air production. It's finally started up right here. Definitely behind the curve, but it is started up. The abductor spam over here on the southern side as well. Very difficult to deal with. Luckily, the A-boats are on top of it. Going to shoo back those abductors, but a juggernaut is already out on the high seas. We do have as well a despot being produced. Jamaica's going full-fledged into the naval economy, essentially taking all that time to build up a stellar economy on the shore and then using it in the sea. Land-based economy in the sea is absolutely fabulous. It is tremendously efficient. One of the most efficient there is. Probably the most efficient that you can get to. Using a land-based economy to fund your sea shenanigans is definitely going to be helpful. Xenodragon likewise going for a serious land-based investment. We do have these grenade launchers, by the way. These are a cool new static defense structure. Just saw a nuke go off out of the corner of my eye, but I wanted to showcase these. little grenade launcher tower. It fires a funny little bouncing projectile grenade. Doesn't collide all too often, but that's why it fires 3 of them, just to be sure. Nukes connecting in the middle of the map right here. Demons running out behind all the mammoths. Mammoths, I guess, the bot counterpart to all of the all of the Tsar spam that's happened so far. So much reclaim indeed. Looks like finally the spam up to that northern side has stopped, more or less. Catapults, sorry, not catapults, cataphracts rather, going to be trying to get as much value in over on this side as they can. I don't mind it, but definitely without their turbo lasers, those cataphracts are quite a bit more disappointing. Just like that. Despite completely being pushed out of the sea, via the power of the duck and a strong determination, Vanaja has managed to claw himself back into the waters and pull back into the high seas. Not just pulling back, but actually managing to reclaim a significant portion of it. We're going to even reclaim the radar tower down here just for the hell of it. Abductors are handed over on the northern side here as well, which is always nice. This abductor version can actually EMP air units as well, which is pretty funny. Kind of a hilarious interaction. Yeah, there you go. You can see that fighter is paralyzed. Absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. No solid angle to push right here. Without full-blown anti-sub production right now, there's no way to deal with all of these ducks underneath the water. The Paladins trying desperately to clean them all up with their depth charge launchers, but there really just isn't anything to beat them. I think probably the best way to beat all these ducks would just be to go into a duck spam ourselves. At one point or another, Xenodragon had a Cortex Commander, so maybe that would have been a viable option. I'm not 100% convinced, but it could have been a viable option. At some point, at the very least. This southern side at a stalemate right here. Nobody wants to push in. Longbow eventually going to fire away at everything over here. You can see the abductors making this a really ridiculously easy fight to push into. But the ducks under the sea, blasting away all of the build power here. Despite torpedo launchers, despite defenses of all sorts, the ducks still managed to find such tremendous value right in the middle of the base over here. Hilarious. Big Marauder run by on the left-hand side as well. Torpedo Spitter's going to come out into the open oceans here to try and fire away whatever they can. A little bit of a pause to hand over the units right here. Xenodragon lagging out of the game under the weight of Vanaja crushing down on top of him. Abductors paralyzing all of this with no response from the air player. Cough, cough. Definitely not making this a comfortable moment here. The Marauders going up to a Nuki B here. Grenade launchers trying to clean all this up. Trying desperately. Xenodragon with the commander in position. Does not degen. The restraint. Oh, okay. Alright. Almost got it. The restraint on that man is immaculate. Nuki B goes up. The ducks have crumbled the defenses, and the Cataphract are now running amok over here. Xenodragon hiding behind the shield will go up in smoke as the Marauder projectile pushes through those defenses. Demons and all sorts of other units will come on over in this direction. Mammoth's trying to safeguard this coastline, but already you can smell the end of our time on the southern seas is near. Northern Sea has sent so many units to their doom right here. Shocked to see how many units have perished along this coast right here, especially over on this coast as well. You can almost imagine if just the entire 20 minutes or so of random units streaming across had just instead been building up units, instead of sending them, just building them up, saving them up on the seas. I almost wonder if that would have been enough to break through at this point. Hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of units at that stage in the game. unfair comparison in some degrees. Cataphracts piercing the shields in order to blast away the economies right here. The last remaining vestiges of an economy of Xeno Dragon eventually handed over to Stannis, while the Juggernaut choosing to self-destruct right here. Going to end it all in a blaze of glory. See, the explosive radius of a Juggernaut is quite tremendous. Boom it goes. Follow up nukes just to make sure it stays down. And the Mammoths will shrug it off. Praetorian here also, we won't shrug that one off. That nuke hit much closer to home, bringing those just down to 4% HP. Quite low indeed. The Praetorian out now from the backline. Definitely sufficient to say, though, to give Vanaja an inch and you will take a country mile. Ridiculously powerful. AA boats having a rough time dealing with a lot of this. Mass martyr? Yeah, martyr. That's right. Wanted to say heretic for some reason. Similar, but not quite. Martyr's headed across right now, trying to find some value. Do they pierce shields is the question. Deflect everything shields, specifically. Oh, okay, well. I guess if you just park them right on top, it absolutely works. That's a interesting way of doing that, certainly. Finally done some damage with the catapults, the capital ships over here, targeting down the geothermal. An obvious target, but one that's delayed itself for quite some time over here. Eventually going to blast it to smithereens. Means that the bases on the front line right here for the blue team will go up in smoke. Anti-nuke will fire here to protect these capital ships from nuclear barrage. Love to see that we mix that in the composition. Shields causing quite a disruption over here. Might be worth trying to blast those apart. But this is the problem with this map. As soon as you have control of the Southern Sea, you have so much more opportunity to blast away at a bunch of the bases over here. Whereas these capital ships on the Northern Sea, yeah, they're not really going to be able to get all too much more value. I mean, there's a little wind turbine farm over here. There's some advanced metal extractors, all that good stuff. But realistically speaking, those boats would have so much more value on the southern side. And indeed, we do have a couple of capital ships already thrown together right here by Vanaja, who's going to start sending those across the map once it is clear to do so. Mass cataphract making it a little bit awkward, but not the end of the world. Lunkheads versus cataphracts, pardon me. In their default configuration, the Lunkhead takes it every time, at least in my book. Pretty confident that the Lunkhead is just the superior unit, if you're going to spam out about 1 billion of them. That being said, there is something to the satisfaction of firing off that big green death laser. You can see there's big plans in the works. In the bright works. Thank you. Thank you. I will be here all week. You can see there's big plans in the works right here. Loads and loads of economy scaling happening on the back of this here for the red. And especially with the reclaim happening right now, pulling ahead slightly. But the economy is already fabulous for the blue team, and it's not slowing down anytime yet. You can see there's plenty of room for continuing to scale. We've got E-converters continuing to come up. We've got aphises continuing to be built. Tons of nuclear bombers as well right here for the purple commander, who's eventually going to actually fully transition into just dragon production. We're going for nuclear bomber and dragon production. That's about as expensive composition as you could possibly imagine. Certainly going to necessitate a tremendous investment in order to keep that up and running. Another nuke in the middle of the map. These demons don't have the thickest of armor plating, so really nuking them does seem effective. See, I think these already took a nuke to the face, but that means probably about 20, maybe 15% damage per nuke. Relative to what other T3 units take, that's actually considerably high. Couple fighters sent around on the right-hand side. Bombers, though, coming in on the left. My goodness, those tsunami seaplane bombers do move pretty quick. With the swiftness unparalleled, marching directly towards my base, triggering an all-out response. Every fighter is pulled, and the bombers will eventually get through. Sorry, the bombers will not eventually get through. The fighters will prevail. And eventually, the day is saved. One of those things that I hadn't even thought about because, well, it's one of those harder things to realize in-game when you're actually playing as opposed to with a full spectator's camera. But there was definitely some openings here. At this point, there was definitely quite a bit less fighter production from the enemy because they were working so hard on those demons and those or not demons, pardon me, the dragons. The dragons and the nuclear bombers, that's the word. Losing my train of thought here because I was thinking of something else. The reason these Marauder got kited around like this is because I built this wall right here. So this is a really cheeky play. It's something I wanted to explore more in the future. But basically the idea being if you wall these sections off, it automatically kites different units in different directions. So you can see that those Marauder actually avoided taking this path and kited into the units over here, essentially saving myself from a little bit of a run by over there. Kind of a fleeting moment of victory on the lapse of total defeat right here as Vanaja's quadruple Black Hydra move forward to blast down the base over here of the Hot Pink Commander, the Powder Pink Commander, Beast Eater 69. Down goes some of the build power, and the Aphyses will be short to follow. Well, maybe. Yeah, certainly within range. Could absolutely expect to see those firing away soon here. Catapults are trying their best, for what it's worth. What is that, about 2%, maybe 3% per shot right there? Obviously terribly inefficient right here. That being said, there's not a ridiculously efficient way of fighting this, per se. See, the fighters are pulled. Sent in every which way. Trying to get on top of everything that they can. At some point, it's a leap of faith, and you've just got to send the fighters. You've got to hope that your airwave is strong enough. And in this case, it certainly was. A follow-up bombing attempt right here absolutely would have killed. A couple of bombers through the middle right here would have definitely shut down a significant portion of economy. But unfortunately, full production was centered around building nothing but fighters. That left no room for bombers. Thinning the air wall like that, sometimes well worth it. Other times can just cause issues. Wow. The Behemoth apparently taking down 1, 2, 3 capital ships. My goodness. Best anti-navy apparently. The humble Behemoth. This time the unit's much more focused. Yeah, you can see those tanks much more willing to do what it takes to get through this choke point over here. I believe White Chip Ghost has realized, wait a second, why didn't I break through over on this side last time? And that was, of course, because of these T2 walls. And you can see if you click over on this side, the walls actually end up saving the day. You can't keep me out of the sea, cries out Vanaja. Apparently not. The man really cares for it. Marauder coming up right now. Trying to break through the walls. Yeah, these T2 walls definitely quite sturdy. Took a good long while for this Marauder to break through. Eventually they do, but just in time to meet a bastion waiting for them. It's essentially a pulsar that fires quite a bit faster. Yeah. Very, very good to say the least. When it shoots. Go on. When it shoots, I said. There we go. Not that it'll matter all too much. Marauder breaks through, build power goes up in smoke. Single Seeker in the backline manages to pop the economy. Boom go the E-converters and the T2 labs. Definitely an annoying hit right there. Crumbling a large part of the economy, certainly. Tons and tons of metal production. Despite the energy production are about the same for both teams, the metal production is plummeting because, of course, those E-converters going offline means that the metal isn't actually being spent. Loads of shields have been set up right here by Beast Eater, but I just don't know if there's any amount of shields that's strong enough to deter this many capital ships. We're now approaching, wow, grand total of 7 capital ships. When in doubt, more capital ships seems to be the appropriate answer. Anti-nukes will shoot down those nukes, but at this point it's only a matter of time. This Pitbull up here probably the most efficient pit bull I think I've ever built. Now going on 25 kills and counting. Yeah, ridiculously efficient pit bull. There we go. Capital ships. This is what I was talking about with the capital ships being so much more efficient on the southern side than they are on the northern side. Torpedo bombers having a hard time because, of course, those bombs drop before they get over the water, which means they collide with the land and effectively don't actually manage to do anything. Just like that, the mass capital ship punches through. At this point, 126,000 metal worth of ships blasting away at any number of shields they'll be able to break through. It's essentially a mobile wall cannon. Yeah. Whoa. Nuclear missile comes across. Fed up with that pit bull, apparently. Not happy with Mr. Worldwide. That is a screenshot of all screenshots right there. The Black Hydra firing in tandem, letting loose their guns of war. Turning to glass everything on the face of this planet. More and more nukes being launched all the time, trying to find openings wherever possible. Few and far between there they are, but whenever you land a nuke, it does feel pretty good. There's a good one, for instance, taking out all of these support vessels right here, leaving these capital ships quite naked. It definitely feels like we overinvested in this northern sea and underinvested in the southern one. It's one of the things that I love about these games, and especially about new maps, is figuring out exactly how they work and why they work. Trying to see what situations work best for what, how to maximize the right areas and the right priorities in the game. The death pole is launched though. Abductors flying forward right here for zombie, paralyzing a bunch of these units, making them very easy targets for the capital ships to fire away at. Anti-nukes up in the air as well. Because the build power fell so tremendously, obviously my fighter production has been hindered quite significantly, leaving the teams with, or leaving the red team anyways, with very, very few fighters up in the skies. The capital ships with so much value though. Between them all, 572 kills, nothing. Nothing whatsoever. Light work for a couple of capital ships. There go the abductors. An interesting game-winning play to use the abductors here, but I suppose it could work. Sending forth everything that there is. Trying not to run into too much anti-air, of which there is still quite a significant margin. The Marauder have decided their time is now. Finally rebuilding my economy, but it took way too long. Ooh, big nuke does connect. Takes out a bunch of the fighters right there, actually. A little bit of a mistiming on that. Feels like, yeah, had that nuke not taken out all the fighters right there, maybe these abductors would be a little less shy to move in. But there we go. I think they just realized that the Marauders are running forward regardless. And now is the time to strike. Now, obviously, I would prefer to see these carrying a bunch of beamer turrets, but just going forward like this will work pretty good as well. Their beam weapon going to be quite good for, ooh, as long as they're not grouped up like they are. Oh no. Well, eventually they jumped on the anti-air anyways, but definitely lost more of them there than I think we probably needed to. Their beam weapon quite good at paralyzing, for instance, the shields right here, opening these areas up to harassment from plasma-based weaponry. Gunships moving in as well, capital ships continuing to bombard these other areas. Here they go, EMPing fighters out of the sky. Shutting off fighters mid-air definitely feels like it would kill them, in my humble opinion. Oh, nice split on the Marauders right there. You can see where we were trying to pull them back right there. Sometimes there's only so much you can do, especially in these late game scenarios. Either way, it'll result in the explosion of another base going down right here as the Seafoam Commander manages to take out the right-hand side of the entire map over here. The duck anti-air spam, the Manticore duck spam, has done very, very little over the course of this game. Certainly going to show that more stuff does not always beat less stuff. Sometimes you need the right stuff. Marauder set up a beautiful chain reaction in the base of the Hot Pink Commander, and eventually dooming us to a lifetime of oblivion. I'm not sure where this game ends. There we go, another big explosion over there. I'm not sure where this game ends, but you can, there we go. You can see eventually we are headed down the road where the blue team claims victory in today's game beyond all reason. Love this showcase because it does show you how much that determination matters. Vanaja refusing to give up and eventually managing to take tremendous advantage of the fact that he had his teammates' support and was eventually able to use some of those ducks to get back into this game. And of course, never surrendering in the face of all evil. Or all reason, that works too. Anyways, sure hope you enjoyed this extra long game of Beyond All Reason. I'll see you in the very next one. Peace out, everybody.